All right, guys, ask and you shall receive. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my personal hunting setup. I've been getting a ton of questions on what I run, what arrows, what release, what sight, what bow. So I figured I'd just give you guys a once over of everything I use, whether it be late season, early season, and anything in between. So all that info and more coming at you in 3, 2, 1. Oh yeah. All right, so I get a ton of questions on what I like to run for a hunting setup. As a lot of you may know, I'm a Matthews guy right now. It's not like I'm sponsored by them or I'm paid to say that. I just personally shoot their bows the best. I like the way they feel. So starting with my bow, I am running the Matthews Traverse. So a little bit longer than your average hunting bow. This is 33 inches axle to axle. I really like a little bit longer bow personally. I've got a 30-inch draw on a really short bow. That string angle at full draw, if my finger's the string, even if the draw length is right, that string angle is really steep and I feel like I got to duck to get my head on the string. So having a bow with a little more axle to axle length, when I hit full draw, I can leave my head nice and straight and that string comes in perfectly. Obviously everybody's gonna have their own opinion on that and what feels best to them, but for me, I like a little bit longer bow. I've got this at like 72 pounds right now. I put just a couple turns in the cable, mostly just because generally after you shoot a bow for, a couple weeks, those cables are gonna stretch out and you're gonna lose a couple pounds. So by kind of preemptively putting a couple twists in them, I got it to 72, it was shooting great. It ended up backing down to about 69, even though I didn't move the limb bolts at all. So I put another couple turns in it and got that draw weight back up. I actually just recently went to the 85% mods on it. I was shooting the 75s for a while, and while I really like the responsiveness of the 75s, if I needed to draw back and hold for like a minute or a minute and a half, it was too much effort. So I put the 85s on. I might have lost a little bit of forgiveness out of it, but not very much, not enough to where it really mattered to me. So I'm shooting the 85% mods. I actually still just have the stock strings on here right now. I've had a set of Go strings for like 2 months sitting back here, and I've just been too busy and / too lazy to put them on. But generally, Matthews stock strings are pretty decent. Obviously they're gonna have a little break-in period, a couple weeks, maybe shooting 500 arrows or so, retune everything, reset everything, and then they've been pretty good ever since. So that's the bow. For a sight, this is actually like the original Fast Eddie. This was one of the first ones that they came out with. Shout out to Cabe Johnson for hooking me up with this. I wouldn't say this was a prototype, but it was one of the first ones he brought by the shop. I just happened to be in here that day. I've known Cabe for a long time, and he was really, really cool and hooked up this sight for me. This one, they didn't have the double pin, so let's see if you guys can see this, but this is actually the single pin, and that second little dot you see right there is actually just white fingernail paint that I put on there. And I've moved that around a couple different times on the 2 different bows that I've had this sight on. And basically where I have that set, when my top pin is set at 30, so when I'm hiking around out west here, I set my sight at 30 yards. So that top pin is at 30, and I just had to play around with it a little bit, but that white mark there is actually set so that when my top pin is 30, that one's at 50. So essentially, if it's 20 yards, I can just aim 3 or 4 inches low with my 30-yard pin. If it's 40 yards or 30 yards, I can obviously aim right on with my top pin. 40 yards, I can gap shoot between my 30 and my 50, and then I have the 50-yard dot. So if I don't have time to range an animal and dial my sight exactly to what it is, I can't tell you how many times you're walking along and you look up and you just see that deer giving you the stare down about to take off. If I need to just guess yardage real quick, say, okay, he's 35, I can make it happen. It's not ideal, but I'm not stuck with just a true single pin when I'm aiming a foot high or a foot low or whatever it is. So that's kind of what I did with that single pin. I actually kind of prefer the single pin and then drawing on my own pin, because on the double pin you can't move that second pin. It just is what it is, and you know, when your top pin's at 20, it might be 36, it might be 42, it might be right at 40. You never know. Totally depends on the speed of your bow. But I actually like having the single pin and then drawing my second pin on there. My rest, so this is a trophy taker, but it's the trophy taker from before they sold the company. So this is from 2015, I think, when Dan Evans still owned the trophy taker portion of the company. He then sold trophy taker, kept, you know, the site, and Option Archery basically is now, you know, the former owner of trophy taker. At this time, they were still manufactured in the USA. This rest has been absolutely bulletproof. I've had it for 5 years, not had a single issue with it. I don't want to badmouth any rests, but the newer ones I have not had as good of luck with. I'd say probably 1 out of every 30 or 40 that we sell comes back and that little spring is popped and that rest is standing straight up even when the cord is tight. I think it's just, you know, they sold the company, they shipped manufacturing overseas so that they could save a little bit of money and keep the cost down, and in doing so, the quality control just is not there. So this is a little older trophy taker. That's the Smackdown Pro. Try and get that so you can see it a little better. Really, really nice rest. It's not micro adjustable, but it has laser engraved lines on there, so I can, you know, when I'm broadhead tuning or if I'm playing around with it, you know, I can just move it a teeny little bit here and there. And I have a mark that will tell me, you know, okay, moved it a 16th or a 32nd or whatever. So really, really like that rest. If you haven't seen the video on rests, I go over a bunch of different drop-aways. If this was still in that lineup, it'd be right at the top of the list, but the new trophy takers are actually kind of down at the bottom of my list. I prefer Hamskis and Vapor Trails right now. So that's my rest. Stabilizer. I get a ton of questions on this stabilizer. So this is the Spider Archery Tracker series. So they have the Tracker and the Predator series. The Predator series is larger diameter, same length, same material, but it's larger diameter, and it's got a little bit different weights on the end here. It doesn't have this dampener on the end. This is an 8-inch bar, but then I've got the quick disconnect attached, which gives it another inch. And then this is what I get asked most commonly about probably is this sidebar bracket. Try and get this so you can see how that stabilizer is offset from the riser there. This one is actually made by Matthews. There's a bunch of different companies that make it though. The reason I shoot that is because when I have my quiver on here full of arrows, having my stabilizer offset to the side like that, the mass weight of my bow increases, but the balance does not change by throwing on a bunch of arrows. I hate when you get really used to shooting your bow without a quiver on it, you know, during like 3D season or whatever, your fun shoots around town, or you're shooting league and you got your hip quiver on, and then you throw a full quiver full of arrows on there and it completely changes the way that bow feels and aims. So with this, like I said, it increases the mass weight, but this offsets the weight of the quiver, and it still aims really, really well. I actually think it holds a little better with my quiver on there because of the more mass weight. So I really like that little offset bracket. Like I said, there's a ton of people that make them. Spider makes one, Bee Stinger makes one. This happens to be a Matthews one that we just had laying around the shop here. And then again, this is the Spider Archery Tracker. This is the 8-inch bar, but I've got it on the quick disconnect, which is then attached to the offset bracket. So it really ends up being, with the weights, basically a 10 or 10.5-inch bar. I'm running 6 ounces up front. I've got 2 2-ounce weights and 2 1-ounce weights. That's something you're just going to want to play around with. That's really going to be determined by the amount of heel pressure that you have. You know, if I really shoot a really low wrist and dig into that bow, it's going to want to kick the bottom of the bow out when I shoot. So having a little more weight up front is going to help keep that bow level. Conversely, if you shoot a real high wrist, you know, up in like that, you're not going to need as much weight. It's actually going to want to drive that bow down, so you might need a little less weight or a little shorter bar. A longer bar with less weight essentially achieves the same thing as a shorter bar with more weight. Personally, I like anywhere between an 8 and a 12-inch stabilizer. I tested all the different lengths. I didn't really see any gain with the 12-inch bar over like a 10-inch, and it's just a little less cumbersome to haul around the woods. So that's why I went with that stabilizer. I don't run a back bar for hunting. It undeniably holds better, but this holds plenty fine for me. I can still group, you know, 2-3 inches at 60, 70, 80 yards. And it's when you're hiking around a bunch, it's really cumbersome to carry a sidebar. You know, I can't put my bow up over my pack like this on my back when I'm hiking. You know, I've got a Mystery Ranch and the frame is right there, and this bow literally just sits right here. I mean, I can be completely hands-free. Can't do that with a sidebar on there. If I was sitting in just a tree stand or a ground blind all the time, I would have no problem shooting a sidebar because my bow's just gonna be hanging there until I need to grab it and shoot it. But I don't shoot one on this. So that is my stabilizer. Next thing I have on here is my release. So I'm shooting the B3 Hawk. Really like this release. So for those of you who don't know, B3 is the family who formerly owned Scott Releases. Scott was sold to the Total Outdoor Group, who promptly drove the quality of the product into the ground. No offense, TOG, but it happened. So they had like a 3 or 5 year no compete clause. When that was over, the Scott family started B3 releases. This particular one, I love. You know, it's a hook style release, so really quick to load. I don't have to look down and hook it onto my loop. I can just feel my loop, hook it right in. The trigger on it is awesome. So it's just ever so slightly, try and focus on that, swept back. So it's really comfortable to get your finger on there. I'm not losing any draw length with it. I can adjust the length of it here. So I have mine shortened all the way up because I like to come in and hook that trigger and have everything tight here. I don't like reaching for that trigger. It's got a comfortable strap on it. You know, you can easily take this off and put it on an aftermarket strap like a BOA or something like that. It comes with 2 springs as well, the standard and then an even stiffer one. It's a little bit of a bear to change out the springs, but honestly, just the standard one is pretty stiff. I mean, I can get on that trigger and not worry about it going off at all until I start to actually apply pressure to it. It takes a decent amount of pressure. You know, you can adjust the amount of travel, obviously, that the trigger has. I have mine set so that it's as little travel as possible. I can't feel it move. It might move a thousandth of an inch, but I don't feel it move before it goes off, which for me is really important. So that's the B3 Hawk release. Quiver and arrows. So I'm running the Tight Spot. I've had this quiver for a long time. What's cool about these is you literally buy one of them and you have one for life. They have an unconditional lifetime warranty. You know, these are just hollow carbon rods here. I've stepped on one. I kind of lost my footing and my bow was sitting behind me and I just stepped right on this and it didn't like break it in half, but it definitely crushed that rod and sent it back to them and sent me a brand new one. So this is a 5 arrow. They make a 7 arrow. They got a bunch of different camos now. I just went with this carbon hood because it'll go with like any camo I ever decide to get on a bow. You know, the Tight Spot is cool because it's got these little plungers here to focus on those. Gosh dang it, camera, focus. Focus. There we go. So these little plungers right here, depending on the diameter of arrow I have, I can tighten or loosen those plungers and it basically is gonna pinch the holders together tighter. So if I tighten that plunger, it's gonna push these 2 sides together and it's gonna pinch my arrows tighter. So your arrows aren't gonna wobble around in there, they're not gonna rattle. If you're going through really brushy country like we have on the coast here, I'm not gonna go into a thicket of salal and walk out with only 2 arrows in my quiver. And then I can adjust it in and out, up and down. As the name would suggest, it holds it extremely close to the bow. You know, it's right next to that limb. So again, it's not sitting way out here where it's gonna wanna change the balance of my bow. So I really like the Tight Spot. You know, Matthews makes a great, if you're shooting Matthews, they make a great 2-piece quiver as well that I really like. Holds it really tight to the bow, super lightweight. But I've always just liked to be able to take this on and off and not have to, you know, unbolt anything. So arrows, I'm shooting the Axis match grade. These are 300s. I've got them cut like 29.5 inches. I've got the standard inserts with 125 up front. That gives me about 12.5% FOC, which I'm not one of these guys who needs to run 30% FOC. I've blown through everything I've shot with one of these. They're coming in at like 490 grains. Just always really like these arrows. These are the AAE, the new Hybrid 23 vanes. I'm running a 4 fletch on these just because I'm still shooting a fixed blade broadhead and I want a little bit of extra steerage. You know, these are definitely lower profile than like a Blazer vane or the Max Stealth vanes. So having a little extra drag there, I think really helps with my broadhead flight. You know, my bow is tuned to where it's shooting a bare shaft and a flat shaft right next to each other. And my broadheads, I didn't have to do anything when I sighted them in. Again, that's a whole different video, but broadhead tuning is not, it's not the broadhead usually, it's the bow. If your bow is not tuned well, your broadhead is not gonna fly well. It's that simple, at least if it's a fixed blade. So I've just got the standard knock. I don't really like lighted knocks. The consistency of the knock itself is not what I want it to be. I think over time, turning it on and off, anything that moves around in the back of my arrow is not for me. Even like the nocturnals, you got to kind of dig in there to turn it off. If you're not really careful and you're really reefing on it, it's going to bend that knock towards the position that you're pushing on it all the time over time. So then you get that one arrow that comes out of your bow and just does the all the way down to the target, and it's just not my thing. So anyway, hope that didn't just bore you to tears. Like I said, I get a lot of questions on the equipment that I run, so I thought I'd just do a head to toe overview of what I like for my hunting gear. I use the same stuff whether I'm hunting deer, elk, bear, whatever. I have not had a chance to run an arrow through an animal with this particular bow. Hopefully that changes here in the next couple days. We got deer season opening up. I had kind of a slower elk season, unfortunately. It was really hot and early the week that I had the first week, and it was an early year anyway, and it was like 90 degrees, and anyway, everybody's got an excuse, right? So I'll shut up, but didn't get one. Looking forward to trying for deer, and then I've got a late bull tag coming up in January on the southern coast here. So anyway, thanks for watching. As usual, comment below if you have any questions. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Really helps us out. We've got some really exciting things coming to you guys soon. I'm not going to give too much away, but just in time for Christmas, we've got some pretty high caliber production videos coming your way. So stay tuned for more info on that. I'll be releasing more stuff as we get closer here. We're just a couple weeks from finishing everything up. We put a lot of time and effort into this, and we're really excited for the finished product. So anyway, thank you guys. See you on the range, and keep them in the middle.